Please welcome our moderator for the evening, Brittany Shaw, from the Future of Film is Female.
And please welcome Director Sally Aitken and cinematographer Ann Johnson Prum. It's great to have you both here. Congratulations on this film. It's a light in the darkness, I think. It's such like a good, warm feeling after I watched it. I think probably top of mind for a lot of people is what's going on in LA and the fires and maybe how dear Terry is doing. And I wonder if you have an update or if you could kind of share with us how she's doing.
Sure, yes, thank you. Good question. I mean, it's pretty shocking actually when you watch the opening scenes in the film and you go flying over those hills, and we've all just seen those hills in the doom scroll that is our news feed at the moment. I mean, it's horrific what's happening, and you know, I live in Australia and we are not immune to wildfires there. So Terry is fine, and the birds are like the Los Angelinos, or Angelinos, I think that's how you say it, will rebound. But it's devastating at the minute. Anne can speak much more authoritatively than I can about what that actually means for the hummingbirds. But fortunately, the winter season means that they're not in nesting or fledgling, or you know, they're not in those kind of critical life stages. But Anne, do you want to say anything about that?
I think the biggest problem for them probably is just, you know, habitat. And anywhere they go, as you can see, they're quite competitive. So let's say all the ones from Palisades move over to Hollywood Hills, there's going to be other hummingbirds there. So we'll see. Hopefully we'll go back, put up a lot of hummingbird feeders, and it'll be all right.
How far, not to like turn this into a scientific discussion, but how far would a hummingbird like travel to find a new neighborhood, maybe if theirs has been destroyed?
Well, they can migrate. A lot of them migrate to South America and then come back.
So they'll move a few neighborhoods.
They're fairly adaptable little creatures, and also, you know,
they want to live.
They do. They've got a survival instinct, and I mean, they're extraordinary. So the ones that migrate, they hang out in South America, and then they think nothing of flying over the Gulf of Mexico. Well, I just went on a 17-hour flight in a plane, and I can tell you it's a mean journey traveling the world, and they like lose half their body weight or something absolutely crazy. I mean, it's not like they've got a lot to lose in the beginning. Like they're extraordinary creatures.
So you first came to this story through Terry's book, the 2015 book. Can you tell us what kind of drew you in, or even how you came to the book in the first place?
I can. It makes me, I always think I sound very superficial actually when I tell the story. So Terry's memoir of rehabilitating hummingbirds in Hollywood for the last nearly 20 years is called Fastest Things on Wings. And Bettina Dalton, the producer of the film, and I had worked together some 3 years previously on a film called Playing with Sharks. And that film is about an extraordinary woman who is really a bit like the Jane Goodall of the underwater world and has made a career fighting for sharks. She started off as a hunter and goes on a big transformation, and she and her husband shot all the live footage for Jaws, and she's amazing, and she's in her late 80s now, and she's still out there fighting for sharks. Anyway, that film was a big success. It premiered at Sundance, and it then later sold to Disney Plus, and we were all, you know, very thrilled for Valerie and for the film. And then Bettina said to me, well, we've got to do this again. That was great. and so she started firing me all these different ideas. And she sent me a book review of Terry's memoir, and I thought, who runs a hotline for hummingbirds? Like, how much trouble do hummingbirds get into that they need like a 24/7 call center? I thought that is just the most bizarre idea I'd ever heard. I'm instantly intrigued. I thought it was quirky. I thought it was curious. I thought it was like a niche of humanity. And actually what happened is then, of course, I read the book, which is extraordinary because Terry's extraordinary, and the book is full of information, and it's very metaphorically written as well. And then Bettina and Terry met, and turned out, incredibly, that they had both lost their husbands tragically, but within literally a week of each other. And so there was this kind of profound realization that actually this was a story that could really be about healing and about kindness and about compassion and the visual possibilities, and finding Anne, who shot all that extraordinary footage of those hummingbirds in super slow-mo, was just too rich to pass up as well. So the film journey started off a bit like maybe the film itself. You know, you meet this extraordinary person and you think, what's she doing driving to the supermarket with a hummingbird on the passenger seat? That's a bit odd. And then by the end, hopefully you realize that she's a prophet, because actually if we pay attention and if we are aware of the smallest things, the big things will hopefully take care of themselves. Yeah.
Despite her, you know, connecting with people in her city every day, her world feels pretty private in a way. And I think, you know, she says at some point something about the hummingbirds really transcend words. So I think there really is this sense of wordlessness in her world, a lot of silent or maybe physical communication. Was she open from the get-go to being on film? It seems possibly against her nature.
I'm laughing because Terry is tough, actually.
Very tough.
Terry is like, okay, Brittany, well, just so you know, if you're in the way with the camera, bird's gonna die. But that's fine, that's on you. With that, it's like your invitation to film. So, as she says, she didn't trust easily, and yet she's super interesting, and you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, on the surface of it, you're like, right, okay, it's a woman in a house, there are some birds. Make a film, go. It's not exactly the stuff of like grand cinema. And I remember saying to the editor at the beginning of the post process, I said, oh, look, I think our challenge here is to make the smallest things feel monumental. So the whole approach, in a way dictated by Terry's own restraint, was one of just kind of demonstrate and show, not tell. And she's amazing. She's incredibly bright, as you can probably see. And she was quite prickly at times, and yet her energy was in the right place, which was looking after those little lives, both on the line, because 90% of the work that Terry does is saved in this hotline scenario. It's only the most critical birds that actually come into rehab, be it with her or with any of the rehab centres actually dotted around Los Angeles. So yeah, makes for great documentary characters. Doesn't make for such an easy time filming it.
Yeah.
We were all living together in that
Yeah.
house
Wow.
with Terry. And I don't think Terry ever left till that one day
That's right.
in the car.
That's
or
right.
probably 40 days.
She said, I can't leave the house, Sally. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't leave the house? And she's like, those babies need to be fed every 30 minutes. I have to take them to the supermarket. And I was like, okay, I think we've just found our opening scene.
And I'm so curious about this dance you kind of had to pull off with these teeny tiny creatures who weigh, I think you say, a few grams each. Watching it, I was thinking about the frame rate of your camera and how that maybe matched or didn't match or challenged the bird's wings or vice versa, and how you kind of found rhythm with them. It seems pretty difficult.
Well, they're probably about as big as your thumb. And they're moving.
Everybody do it now. Look at your thumb. Now try and film that moving really fast.
Those are the adults.
It's
Yeah.
not easy.
Yeah, so we use a high-speed camera, Phantom High-Flex, that you use, like a lot of people use it, you see it in baseball games, they show the baseball spinning, same camera. So we just use it to show these hummingbirds spinning. And I do think when I first met Bettina and Sally, and they told me about this, I'm a pretty much wildlife person. I thought, well, rehab, I don't know. Is that kind of the story you want to tell? And then I met, you guys were just so exuberant I know, how bad can it be? We'll be all in a house in Beverly Hills together with a lot of hummingbirds. How bad can it be? Sign me up.
And this was not your first time with hummingbirds. You've made
No, I've made other television hummingbirds.
So just like there is a hotline for hummingbirds, there is an expert hummingbird cinematographer, and she's standing on stage.
All kinds of worlds we can work. Yeah.
Terry describes them at one point as sort of a portal to magical realism. Did you see them in that way? Did that kind of affect story or visuals, how you approach the story?
It did, very much so. In fact, initially, because I had read somewhere, potentially the information is not good, but I had read that hummingbirds see an ultraviolet light, and I was very interested in this idea of the sensory perceptions of ourselves being not the same as other creatures. And in fact, what we were really reaching for with the very high speed cinematography, so you shoot at a very high frame rate in order so that you can slow the image down and it retains its crispness, was an otherworldliness, because the way that Terry sees the birds and the invitation to see the birds in a way that supersedes the literal, that supersedes the reality of your everyday, was an opening for the film in terms of its stylistic approach. So I had thought initially that maybe we would treat the footage in some incredible otherworldly way, but in fact it didn't require that. And in fact, the editor for the film, a beautiful woman called Tanya Neem, really respected, I think, Ann's intention in the way that the footage of those hummingbirds in the wild had been shot, making sure that she didn't, speed ramp those images. And we worked also with a beautiful composer, Caitlin Yo, to create this score that was, underpinned by string instruments to sort of mimic the flight. And the idea was that maybe all these visual layers between the high-speed photography, the reality of the rescue, and then this kind of fractured memory idea, the idea of the archival textures, hopefully each would amplify the other. And the idea in the film, hopefully, was not to be didactic, not to be anything other than an invitation to emotion and an invitation to kindness, because we don't see those stories very often. And maybe at a time like now, we need those stories more than ever.
And I'm curious for you, did approaching the hummingbirds maybe in this context feel different than you had on other occasions?
What
In
you
the
mean, like
camera?
with the surrounding cast
Yeah.
that she had?
Yes.
What did
Filming
you
with
guys
Sally
really-
over my shoulder was new. But yeah, I think
A little bit like this.
right. I think it was just to try to bring sort of more trippy imagery. There's that one sort of California soul shot that I knew when I got that, and I showed it to Sally. She's like, "Oh yeah, this is good." I mean, it basically visually talked to what Terry was trying to communicate, that she had this otherworldly, like a mescaline experience, changed her life. She was able to sort of see into the hummingbird's world, or see this empathetic world in a new way. So I think anytime visually we could go there, and sort of tap into a surreal, whether it was with flares or anything like that, things got kind of yummy.
There's a really poignant sequence where a few of the bird, maybe Raisin, is being buried. There's this really lovely, really touching funeral sequence, and I think you both, approach it with such love, as does Sally. Terry. And those close-ups of the feathers are, I think, something I've maybe never ever seen before on screen. It feels impossible to be seeing something that close, that's that small. Can you talk about maybe saving that imagery and kind of attaching that to the death, because it is it's such an intimate look at them.
That is such a great question. Thank you for that. So that incredibly close imagery of those feathers. I mean, first of all, obviously the spectrum of hummingbird species and the array of colours, and they're not really colours because it's iridescent, you know, this gorget, these throat feathers that, you know, change depending on which light hits them at what angle. I mean, as Anne says, they're trippy. They're like, how do you not see magic in there? I mean, they're amazing. And we thought, wow, what an opportunity. Shall we try and film them really, really close? And one of the other cinematographers, so in addition to Anne, there are two beautiful gentlemen, Nathan Barlow and Dan Freen, who also filmed this film. And Nathan, who himself is a little bit trippy and totally delightful, was tasked with this idea of shooting very, very macro, these feathers. And I can't really describe to you just how critical that focal length is, but it's super close. And, you know, he's being as absolutely rock still as he can. And we went to the museum in Los Angeles. Yeah. And it's incredible because there they have collected hummingbirds for almost 100 years. And I remember there was a moment I was like, we've got to get this in the film. And I was like, no, that doesn't really work in the film. But they pulled out this drawer and all these handwritten tags of what year it was, 1954 or whatever, and what species. And I just thought, wow, there's a story of Los Angeles also in these birds, because the patterns of which species are in the city has also changed over time. And Terry actually is not trained, in inverted commas, as a hummingbird rehabilitator. She is, in a way,
That's why she buries the
self-taught.
birds.
That's right. Yeah.
I was surprised actually, yeah.
Yeah. She's self-taught and she's inherited that knowledge from other women. And it's almost like a grandmotherly generational thing. But the fact that she honours those lives, it's like all of us, you know, we want to know that we matter. We want to know that our time here has been worthwhile. And in fact, the line that accompanies that scene that you're referring to, which is the idea that their bones are so light they disintegrate so quickly, that just struck me as like the most poetic thing I think I'd ever read or heard. And when you package all of that with the ephemeral nature and the precariousness of our lives, and I don't know if we get older and we suddenly realize that more acutely, but it just felt really profound to me. So we wanted to honour not only the fact that Terry honours the birds, which is pretty extraordinary in the middle of a busy hummingbird season, that she takes the time for every bird, and there are hundreds of birds across the season. And in a way it's honouring ourselves and every other living being on earth.
And I imagine you haven't filmed many bird funerals out in the field, not a normal part of your ritual.
Not since I was a little girl.
Yeah.
Remarkably, I mean, one of the things that's tragic about any film is all the stuff that you can't fit in the film. And there were so many incredible people that phoned Terry or texted Terry or came to Terry's door, and one of them was a woman called Hannah, and she had 3 children, and the home movie footage of Hannah is this incredibly busy mother, and they had been filming as a family the hummingbirds that had nested outside the kitchen window, and the mama hummingbird that had sat on this nest for, you know, all this time, and the mama hummingbird had died, and Terry and Hannah sort of eventually thought possibly that the mama hummingbird had ingested something. But she had these 2-day-old chicks, and she was syringe feeding them, this incredibly busy mom, you know. And I couldn't, we tried, we had scenes of it in the film, it just didn't make the final film. But those girls in her family had buried the mother hummingbird with flowers, just as Terry did. And when they were explaining that in the moment, Terry told the little girl, she said, that's what I do. It was just such an affirmation for that care. And again, it's that, in a way, it's the permission to be kind that I think a lot of people find in watching this film, and particularly obviously the way that Terry engages with people, thanking people for their kindness. It's not that hard. We never do it. that's what makes it amazing.
You know, I'm sure you know here, I don't know if it's a worldwide thing, if it's a thing here in the US, bird watching has become incredibly popular. Are there birders here? I bet there are birders.
Yay, birders!
Definitely.
Especially since the pandemic. What do you think that is? What do you think we are all like looking to connect
Why
with?
not?
And birds. Why not? But yeah. But why not? Why now? You know.
Ann's like, finally, we're all coming to the party. I think it's this idea that we are hopefully finally paying witness to our natural world and a reminder that we are part of that natural world. I like to believe that anyway. I think our lives are very busy and they're very chaotic, and we're kind of in a deluge of information, and something like birding requires attention. In fact, one of the things that Terry says, a lot of people say to her is, oh my God, Terry, I haven't seen the mother, I'm really worried about this nest. They'll say this on the phone. And she'll say, all right, put down your phone and tell me if the mother comes back, because I tell you she's there. And then they'll phone back and they're like, oh my God, I saw her, she came back. And Terry says, she was always there, you just saw her for the first time. So I think there's just something about this idea that we are fast-paced, and maybe we're all actually craving a bit of slowness and a bit of attention, and there's something in that meditation, I think.
I think birds are just a way in. I mean, birds are an excuse to go out into the natural world, right? So if you're like, oh, I'm going birding, but you're really just going and hanging out in Central Park or wherever you go and do that, and wherever it is, and spending time out in the natural world. So you can just say I'm birding, and that gives you an excuse to just, do nothing.
For all the Type A New Yorkers, that they need like an actual event
Right,
and
they'll
a
be
checklist, when in fact really the science is like overwhelming if we spend time in nature. I mean, God, if we see green, stuff happens to us, like it's important. We are nature.
We are out of time, but I am curious for each
We're
of
going
you
owling
which,
tonight.
Yeah, bring your torches.
We have a good time. I will come. Well, there's actually a snowy owl in New York City right now. Huge news. I'm curious who you each got the most attached to, maybe, or who your favorite was to film or edit.
Well, I think I spent a lot of the time with the wild animals, but early in the morning, Nathan and I would hang out in that room with Terry when she was feeding, so I'd get up really early too. And I think cactus, how could you not? It was such a lost cause, and just like it's never gonna make it, she's just doomed. And then I still can't figure out how she did. Her thing was, like this. But yeah, you're just rooting for her. I was rooting for her.
Well, I'll be killed if Jimmy's agent finds out I don't say Jimmy. So I'm going to say Jimmy. It was just delightful seeing the birds in the way that Terry does. And yeah, pretty
full of
funny.
life. Yeah. Thank you so much and congratulations.
Thank you.